People ask me what I saw in his eyes. They want me to say I saw evil. They want me to say I saw the devil himself staring back at me. But that is not what I saw. And the truth, I think, is worse, much worse. I will get to that. But first you need to understand who I was before that moment, because the boy who stood in that field in Nuremberg, shaking, barely breathing, waiting for the Führer to walk past him, that boy believed. He believed with his whole heart. And you cannot understand what I saw unless you understand what I expected to see. My name is Lothar Brenner. I was born in 1925 in a small town about 30 kilometers outside Nuremberg. I am 90 years old now. Most days I feel every single one of those years, especially in my knees. I grew up in a small house with my mother, my father, and my younger sister. My father sorted letters for the postal service. My mother stayed home. We were ordinary people, nobody special, the kind of family that history forgets. When I was 5 or 6, I remember my father sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He did not cry, but he was close. There was no work. The money was worthless. My mother carried bags full of bills to the bakery just to buy bread. I did not understand inflation or economics. I just saw that the adults were afraid. Then things changed. I was about 8 when Hitler came to power. I did not know what a chancellor was. I did not care about politics, but I noticed that my father stopped looking so tired. There was meat on the table. He had steady work again. The adults seemed hopeful for the first time I could remember. Whatever this new government was, it was making life better. That is how a child sees the world. Food means good. Hunger means bad. Everything else is just noise. By the time I was 10, the flags were everywhere. Red, white, and black, hanging from every building, every window, every classroom. We sang songs about Germany every morning before lessons. The teachers spoke about our Führer like he was something more than a man, like he was chosen, sacred almost. I believed all of it. Why would I not? Every adult I trusted said the same thing. My teachers, my neighbors, the voices on the radio. When the whole world tells you something is true, you believe it, especially when you are just a boy. In 1935, I joined the Jungvolk. I was 10 years old. Every boy I knew joined. If your family did not let you join, people talked. They looked at you differently, so we all joined. And I will tell you something that is difficult to admit now. I loved it. I loved the camping, the marching, the singing around fires at night. I loved wearing the uniform and feeling like I was part of something important. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. We hiked through forests. We learned to read maps and tie knots and march in formation. We thought we were having adventures. We thought it was all a game, just boys playing soldier in the woods. It was not a game. We were being prepared for something, but we were too young and too blind to see it. By 1938, I was 13 years old. I had been in the Hitler Youth for 3 years, and I wanted only one thing more than anything else in the world. I wanted to see him, the Führer, in person, with my own eyes. That September, I got my wish. September 1938. I remember the month because the leaves were just starting to turn, and there was a chill in the early mornings that made your breath visible. Our Hitler Youth leader gathered us one evening and told us we had been selected. He said that word like it was holy. We would travel to Nuremberg for the Reichsparteitag, the great party rally. We would see the Führer. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, my heart beating so fast I thought it might burst. This was the greatest honor a boy could receive, to stand in the presence of Adolf Hitler, to breathe the same air as him. I had seen him in photographs, in newsreels at the cinema. But to see him in person with my own eyes, only meters away, I could not even imagine it. The journey took most of a day. Buses first, then trains. Hundreds of boys in uniform, all of us pressed together, singing songs, shouting, laughing. The older boys tried to act calm, like this was nothing special, but I could see it in their eyes too, the excitement, the nervousness. We were all the same that day. When we arrived in Nuremberg, I stepped off the train and stopped breathing for a moment. I had never seen anything like it. The city was transformed. Massive red banners hung from every building, some of them 5 or 6 stories tall. Swastika flags stretched across entire streets. Soldiers marched in perfect columns. Music played from loudspeakers mounted on poles. And people, so many people, hundreds of thousands of them, flowing through the streets like rivers. I was 13 years old. I came from a town where the biggest event was the Christmas market. This was something from another world. It felt like the whole German nation had gathered in one place, and the energy of it vibrated in my chest like a drum. They marched us to the Zeppelin field. You have maybe seen photographs of it, the massive stone grandstands, the columns, the eagle perched on top, wings spread wide. It was designed to make you feel small, to make you feel like you were standing before something eternal, something greater than any single human life, and it worked. I felt like an ant standing at the foot of a mountain. Our unit was positioned in one of the youth sections near the front, close enough. We arrived hours before the main event, and we waited, standing at attention, no talking, no moving. The sun was hot, and my legs began to ache. My throat was dry, but I did not care. I would have stood there for days if I had to. As the afternoon stretched on, more and more people filled the field. Then the sun began to set, and something changed. The sky turned orange, then red, then purple, and then they turned on the lights. I do not know how to describe it properly. They called it the Cathedral of Light, 150 searchlights, pointing straight up into the sky, creating walls of light around the entire field. It looked like we were standing inside a temple made of pure white fire. I forgot to breathe. I forgot where I was. I forgot my own name. I just stared up at those columns of light disappearing into the heavens, and I thought, this is what God must see. This is what it feels like to be in the presence of something divine. The crowd began to roar, a sound like nothing I had heard before. Not cheering exactly, deeper than that, a sound that came from the belly, from the chest, from somewhere primal. And I knew, without anyone telling me, that he was coming. He was here. The roar grew louder. It moved through the crowd like a wave, starting from somewhere far behind us and rolling forward until it crashed over our section. Boys around me began to shake. One boy next to me, I remember, had tears streaming down his face already, and he had not even seen anything yet. That is how powerful the moment was. We were trembling before he even appeared. Then I saw him. At first, just a small figure in the distance, walking toward the podium. He was surrounded by officers in uniforms, tall men with medals on their chests. But even from far away, you knew which one was him, something about the way he moved, the way the crowd reacted to his every step. The sound was deafening now, people screaming, crying, reaching their arms out toward him like he could heal them with a touch. He reached the podium and stood there for a long moment, not speaking, just looking out at the sea of people. The searchlights blazed behind him. The flags rippled in the night breeze. And then he began to speak. I could not tell you what he said, not the specific words. His voice echoed across the field, bouncing off the stone structures, filling every corner of that massive space. It was not like listening to a normal person talk. It was like being inside the voice. It surrounded you. It entered you. I felt it in my stomach, in my bones. The crowd responded to every pause, every rise in his tone. When he shouted, they shouted. When he grew quiet, they held their breath. It was like watching a man conduct an orchestra of 300,000 instruments. I stood there with my mouth open, a 13-year-old boy who understood maybe half of the political words he was using, but it did not matter. The meaning was not in the words, it was in the feeling. And the feeling was this: we are special, we are chosen, we are Germany, and nothing can stop us. After the speech ended, there was a pause. Then the announcement came. The Führer would inspect the youth sections. He would walk among us. He would see us with his own eyes. My heart stopped. Actually stopped, I think. I could not feel it beating anymore. The boys around me straightened their backs, lifted their chins, fixed their eyes forward. We had been trained for this moment. Stand tall. Do not move. Do not speak. Be perfect. I heard boots on stone, the crunch of gravel, voices murmuring, then going silent as he approached. He was moving along the rows ahead of us, getting closer. Each second felt like an hour. I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Then he was there, in my row, walking slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Officers flanking him on each side. He was maybe 3 meters away from me, then 2, then right in front of me. He was shorter than I expected. That was the first thing I noticed. In the photographs, in the newsreels, he seemed like a giant. But standing there in his brown uniform, he was just a man of average height. His face was pale, not glowing, not radiant, just pale. Tired looking even. There were dark circles under his eyes that the photographs never showed. And then he looked at me. Not past me, not through me. At me. His eyes moved along the line of boys and stopped for just a second, maybe 2 seconds, on my face. I waited to feel it, the divine presence, the power, the electricity that everyone talked about. I waited to be transformed, to be lifted up, to be touched by greatness. But there was nothing. His eyes were just eyes, pale blue, a little watery, tired, empty almost, like a man who had not slept in a long time. Like a man who was already somewhere else in his mind, going through the motions. There was no fire, no magic, nothing. He moved on. The moment passed, and I stood there, frozen, confused, trying to understand what had just happened, or what had not happened. I stood there for a long time after he passed. My legs were shaking, but not from excitement anymore, from something else, something I could not name. The rally continued around me. The cheering, the music, the lights still blazing into the sky. But I was somewhere else now, somewhere quiet and cold inside my own head. The boys around me were still trembling with joy. Some of them were crying. One boy, maybe 12 years old, had his hands clasped together like he was praying, whispering thank you over and over again. Thank you for letting me see him. Thank you for this blessing. I looked at his face and I felt sick, not because of him, because I could not feel what he was feeling, and I did not understand why. On the train ride home, the other boys talked endlessly about what they had seen. They described the light in his eyes, the power radiating from him. One boy said he felt electricity run through his whole body when the Führer looked in his direction. Another said he saw a glow around his head, like a halo. A third boy claimed that time itself had stopped for a moment, that the whole universe had paused to acknowledge the presence of greatness. They spoke with absolute certainty. They had witnessed something holy, something that would stay with them forever. I nodded along. I said yes, it was incredible. Yes, I felt it too. The most powerful moment of my life. But I was lying, and I knew I was lying, and that knowledge sat in my stomach like a stone that would not move. For weeks afterward, I tried to convince myself that I had felt it, that I had seen what everyone else saw. Maybe I had been too nervous. Maybe my eyes had been blurry from standing in the sun for so long. Maybe I had blinked at the wrong moment, missed the glow, missed the fire. Maybe there was something wrong with me, some defect in my soul that prevented me from receiving what everyone else received so easily. That thought scared me more than anything. What if I was broken? What if I was not a true German? What if everyone found out that I had stood 3 meters from the Führer and felt nothing? They would think I was a traitor, a defective, something to be thrown away. So I buried it. I pushed that moment down deep where I did not have to look at it. I told the story the way everyone expected me to tell it. I described the light in his eyes. I described the electricity. I became a very good liar. I continued with the Hitler Youth. I marched and sang and saluted. I said the words everyone expected me to say. And on the surface I was the same as before. But underneath something had cracked. A small crack, almost invisible. But it was there. And once something cracks, it never fully heals. It just waits. The next year passed, then another. The war began in September 1939. I was 14 years old, still too young to fight. Poland fell in weeks. The radio announced victory after victory. Then Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Holland. France itself collapsed in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. The greatest army in Europe, defeated before summer ended. The newsreels showed German soldiers marching through Paris, and the adults in my town wept with joy. The Führer was a genius. That is what everyone said. The greatest military mind in history. Everything was going according to his plan. Germany would rule Europe, then the world. 1,000-year Reich. I heard those words so many times they stopped meaning anything. They were just sounds, background noise. By 1941, we invaded the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the biggest military operation in human history. Millions of soldiers pushing east. At first, more victories, more newsreels showing smiling soldiers and burning Soviet tanks. But then winter came, and the news became quieter. Fewer details, more talk about sacrifice and endurance, less talk about quick victory. By 1942, the casualty lists grew longer. Names I recognized started appearing. Older boys from my Hitler Youth unit, neighbors. A cousin of mine, Friedrich, who had been 22 years old with a wife and a baby daughter, he died somewhere near a city called Stalingrad. They never found his body. Then came February 1943. Stalingrad fell, not to us, to them, an entire German army, 300,000 men, surrounded and destroyed. The radio announced it with somber music and talk of heroic sacrifice, but everyone knew what it meant. The war had turned. The unstoppable force had been stopped. 2 months later, I turned 18. The letter came within weeks. I was to report for military service, infantry, basic training, then east, always east. That is where the dying was happening. I remember my mother's face when I left. She did not cry. She was past crying by then. She just held my hands and looked at me with eyes that had already accepted she would never see me again. That is what the war had done to mothers. Taken away even the hope. Training was short. A few months of learning to shoot, to march, to dig trenches, to follow orders without thinking. They did not need us to think. They needed bodies, warm bodies to fill the gaps left by all the cold bodies frozen in Russian soil. I arrived at the Eastern Front in late 1943. I will not describe everything I saw there. Some memories are not meant to be shared. They are meant to be carried quietly until you die and take them with you. But I will tell you enough so you understand. The cold was not like any cold I had known. It entered your bones. It made your fingers stop working. It made men weep, not from fear, but from pure physical pain. We wrapped ourselves in everything we could find. Newspapers, curtains stolen from abandoned houses, dead men's coats. Nothing was enough. I saw friends die, not heroically, not in battle charges like the newsreels showed. They died stupidly, meaninglessly. A boy named Gerhard, who had been in my training unit, died because he stepped on a frozen pond that was not frozen enough. He went through the ice and we could not pull him out in time. He was 19 years old. He had shown me a photograph of his girlfriend the night before. Blonde hair, smiling, standing in a garden. I still remember her face better than I remember his. I saw what artillery does to a human body. I saw what hunger does to men's minds. I saw prisoners on both sides treated in ways I cannot speak about. I saw villages burning. I saw children running through snow with no shoes. I saw things that I spent the next 70 years trying to forget and failing every single night. And during the long nights when I could not sleep because of the cold or the fear or the screaming that never seemed to stop even when no one was screaming, I thought about Nuremberg. I thought about those pale, tired, empty eyes. I thought about the cathedral of light and the roaring crowds and the boy I had been, shaking with anticipation, waiting to be touched by divinity. And I finally understood what I had seen. I had seen a man, just a man. Ordinary flesh and blood, a man who needed sleep and food and probably had bad breath in the morning like everyone else, a man who was sending hundreds of thousands of boys like me to die in the snow for his dreams of empire. There was no magic. There was no divine purpose. There was no 1,000-year Reich. There was only a man with a loud voice and a gift for making people believe in things that were not real. That is what I saw in his eyes. Nothing. And the nothing was the truth. I survived. I do not know why. Better men than me did not. I was wounded in 1944, shrapnel in my left leg, and they sent me back to Germany to recover. By the time I could walk again, the war was almost over. I ended up on the Western Front, retreating, always retreating, until finally, in April 1945, I surrendered to American soldiers near a small town whose name I do not remember. They put me in a prisoner camp. 8 months I spent there, sleeping on dirt, eating watery soup, watching men die from dysentery and despair, but I was alive. That was more than most. When they finally let me go, I walked home, or what was left of home. My town was half rubble. My father had died in a bombing raid in 1944. My mother was living in a basement with 3 other families, sharing one stove, one toilet, one small window that let in gray light. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Maybe she was. I am 90 years old now. I have lived a whole life since then. I married. I worked. I had children, then grandchildren. I built a new life in a new Germany. But people still ask me about that moment, that one moment in Nuremberg when Adolf Hitler looked at me. They want me to say I saw the devil. They want a monster, something inhuman, something that explains how all of it could have happened. They want an answer that makes sense. But that is not what I saw. I saw a man, tired, pale, ordinary, a man with nothing special in his eyes at all. And that is the most terrifying thing. Because if he was just a man, then it can happen again, anywhere, anytime. All it takes is someone who knows how to speak, who knows how to make people feel special, who knows how to turn ordinary boys into believers, and people who are desperate enough to follow. That is what I carry with me every single day until I close my eyes for the last time. And maybe not even then.